Alright, so Israel is obviously continuing with their ongoing brutal bombing campaign in the Gaza Strip, as well as potentially gearing up for a large-scale invasion. They've already sort of launched these smaller-scale invasions already at this point, but one of the targets that they recently struck multiple times in just a couple of days here was the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. And so I just want to show you guys a picture of what this actually looked like on the ground after they struck this target, and then I want to show you guys the justification that the IDF gave that even a guy like Wolf Blitzer on CNN didn't really seem to be buying into. So first, let's just go ahead and watch this short little video here of what the aftermath of this kind of a strike looked like. This was a densely populated refugee camp in Gaza. I mean, as you can see there, there's multiple absolutely gargantuan impact craters all around here. You can see some of the surrounding apartment buildings that were just pancaked to the ground or really no longer even existing at this point. The casualties that I've seen out of this, it's been estimated at least in the dozens, if not potentially even over 100, but we haven't had any, complete confirmation on the actual numbers here. But, look at this destruction here. This was a densely populated area, and you can see, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, potentially, multiple different impact craters there. You have, again, people sort of digging with their hands through the rubble to try to pull people out of this. Okay, here you have a group of people who are literally trying to pull bodies from the rubble. All right, and I don't want to show you guys anything too graphic, but I've seen, obviously multiple dead bodies being pulled out in some of these videos that have been coming through. I want to show you this one from Al Jazeera English to get another little bit of the perspective of the destruction here. They just basically flattened an entire city block to the ground in this one bombing campaign that, again, they hit twice. They hit it first on the first day, which was, I think, 2 days ago, okay, and then the United States was asked about it. We had John Kirby came out, and he gave a flubbing statement where he was basically like, well, I don't really know anything about that, so I'm not going to comment on it right now. And then because, nobody took any strong position on it, they did it again the next day because they thought that it was completely justified. Again, like a whole fucking city block here just flattened to the ground. Scores of people trying to pull, potential friends or relatives or loved ones from the rubble here. Just absolutely disgusting. And the justification that they gave here was that apparently there was like one Hamas battalion commander or something, like not even like a high level guy, but whatever the case may be, their justification that they gave that we're about to watch here in this CNN interview is that there was like one guy who they were going after. Okay, we're talking about dozens of people who have been confirmed killed, okay, and potentially hundreds who have been injured as a result of this bombing, and they think that that's okay. They think that that's totally fine. You're going after a Hamas guy, and so I guess because we gave them this bullshit warning for everybody, the million people living in the north of Gaza, to flee to the south, that therefore anybody who's left, because they can't flee, because that's completely fucking absurd to request that, and illegal under international law to request 1 million people to leave an entire region so that you can bomb it, but they think that that's acceptable. Anybody who's left, they must be attached to Hamas. They're valid targets there because there was one Hamas commander apparently in the region that they were targeting. So let's go ahead and listen to this Wolf Blitzer with this IDF spokesperson here. Now keep in mind, Wolf Blitzer, okay, not only is he like a CNN sort of like corporate stooge kind of commentator here, he also literally used to write for AIPAC, okay? So kind of gives you a little bit of perspective. This is probably the most, appealing audience, the most, easy to justify this to of an audience that this IDF commander could have possibly asked for, and yet even it seems like Wolf Blitzer is having a hard time buying into this.
Yes, I can. We were focused again on our target, a senior commander, Wolf, and we'll be updating you with more data as the hour moves ahead.
But even if that Hamas commander was there amidst all those Palestinian refugees who are in that Jabalia refugee camp, Israel still went ahead and dropped a bomb there, attempting to kill this Hamas commander, knowing that a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children, presumably would be killed. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's not what you're hearing, Wolf. We're focused on this commander, again, who you'll get more data who this man was. Killed many, many Israelis. We're doing everything we can. It's a very complicated battle space. There could be infrastructure there. There could be tunnels there. We're still looking into it, and we'll give you more data as the hour moves ahead.
But you know that there are a lot of refugees, a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children in that refugee camp as well, right?
This is the tragedy of war, Wolf. I mean, as you know, we've been saying for days, move south. Civilians that are not involved with Hamas, please move south.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a little bit more information. You knew there were civilians there. You knew there were refugees, all sorts of refugees, but you decided to still drop a bomb on that refugee camp, attempting to kill the Hamas commander. By the way, was he killed?
I can't confirm yet. There'll be more updated. Yes, we know that he was killed. About the civilians there, we're doing everything we can to minimize. I'll say it again. Sadly, they are hiding themselves within civilian population. And again, we are doing this stage by stage, and we're going to go after every one of these terrorists who was involved in that heinous attack on the 7th of October.
Okay, so I mean, there you go. Again, when Wolf Blitzer, of all people, is not really buying into your argument, probably a shitty argument. Okay, and notice how, again, he references this supposed senior Hamas commander, right? Maybe he was involved in the planning of the attacks on October 7th, whatever the case may be. I don't think that would even be a justification in the first place, even if that was your target here, to just obliterate a refugee camp and kill dozens and dozens of people in the process. That's not exactly how international laws of war work, okay? You don't just get to say, well, there was one person who was a military target of ours, so therefore fuck anybody who's in the way. And by the way, I mean, again, notice the rhetoric that he just used there. He doesn't even know what the actual targets were there. He's saying, well, there could have been, I don't know, maybe there could have been tunnels under this location. Who knows? By the way, there's tunnels all over Gaza. Okay, tunnels have been involved in Gaza for decades and decades and decades. A lot of those tunnels were built to try to get supplies into Gaza, not just for like the militants within Hamas, but to get supplies to average people within Gaza because of the brutality of the siege that they have been under. Okay, so that's like there are tunnel networks all over Gaza. Some may have Hamas people in them, some may have weapons in them, whatever the case may be. There's tunnels everywhere in Gaza. So if you just sort of like loosely float the idea that, I don't know, maybe there were tunnels in this rough location, then does that mean that you get to flatten the entire Gaza Strip to the ground because there's tunnels underneath? You get to just indiscriminately bomb innocent men, women, and children, refugees, because you think maybe there's tunnels underneath? I don't know. We'll get back to you later on that. I mean, it almost seems like this guy doesn't even know what target they just hit. This is an IDF spokesperson. You probably should know that. You just bombed a refugee camp, killing dozens of people, injuring potentially hundreds, and you're turning around and throwing your hands up in the air, and the best case scenario that you can confirm is, well, maybe we got one Hamas guy. I mean, that's how ridiculous this is. That's how absurd this is. But this is the logic that they've been using throughout the entirety of this bombing campaign. How many confirmed Hamas fighters have been killed? I mean, I've seen estimates that go as high as, like, you know, obviously the IDF is claiming one thing, but the actual verified, documented Hamas fighters and top commanders that have been killed, it's like maybe in the couple dozens from some of the estimates that I've seen. Some of the estimates out of the Gaza Health Ministry that we've gotten on the total casualties within the Gaza Strip, and this doesn't even include the violence that's exploding in the West Bank right now with settler violence on Palestinians there, which I'll touch on in a separate video, but the casualty numbers that we've gotten the latest ones, okay, are upwards of over 8,000. Over 3,000 of them are children. 3,000 children. And we have what? Even if I was going to give it a multiple of 10, okay, or 20 or 50, we're talking about maximum maybe a couple hundred Hamas fighters there. So we're talking about a ratio of over 80%, 90% of civilians being killed as a part of these bombing campaigns. And this is entirely justified to the IDF, apparently. Okay, again, to the point where even Wolf Blitzer is not having it. We also had here him speaking to another IDF spokesperson, where I guess this guy kind of just downplayed the idea that there were any civilians who were killed in this strike. Let's go ahead and listen to this one.
Lieutenant Colonel, all of us have now seen the pictures, the widespread destruction in that refugee camp. Even if Israel was trying to target Hamas underground tunnels, as you say, this refugee camp was massively hit. Doesn't Israel still have a responsibility to try to avoid civilian casualties, even if Hamas is among them? How can Israel say it's minimizing civilian deaths right now when Israel went in, bombed that refugee camp, presumably killing some Hamas leadership, but also in the process killing a lot of women and children?
Again, Wolf, you keep repeating women and children, all of that. We haven't seen confirmed numbers of it. We're seeing reports coming out of a party to the conflict. I have not seen confirmed numbers of any of the civilian casualties. I understand that there may be, but I would recommend caution when.
He's literally showing them on screen. They're literally side by side playing videos of civilians that were attacked in this refugee camp. And this IDF spokesperson actually has the audacity to come out and say, well, I don't know, can you really trust anything coming out of the Palestinians? Do we really know? Has there been any women and children that have been confirmed killed? Again, over 3,000 children have been killed as a part of this ongoing bombing campaign, and that's a lower estimate, okay? I talked about this in a previous video on this channel, but part of the reason why the Biden administration came out to downplay the Gaza Health Ministry numbers on the total casualties is just to do propaganda. It's to do PR for Israel, to give them a green light to continue bombing places like the Jabalia refugee camp. But when you actually do an investigation, right? We looked at that Wall Street Journal article that was posted. Okay, we can cross-reference previous estimates during previous bombing campaigns inside Gaza and see what the so-called Hamas-controlled, Gaza Ministry of Health has reported on their casualty numbers. Cross-reference that with the after-the-fact investigations by human rights organizations and the United Nations. They've been incredibly accurate, and even the United Nations officials have been saying that the casualty numbers we're getting out of Gaza right now, including innocent women and children, as he just referenced there and downplayed the idea that they're being killed, is an undercount. That's what UN officials are saying, that it's an undercount because the Gaza Health Ministry's numbers are based on who's coming into their hospital system. Okay, keep in mind the hospital system in Gaza has been essentially collapsed over the last couple of weeks. All right, it doesn't count the people who are still stuck under the rubble, including under the rubble in places like Jabalia now because of that bombing. And I mean, again, going back to the previous guy, well, we told them to flee south. Flee south. He's talking about 1 million people, 1.1 million people, where the infrastructure in Gaza has been bombed into oblivion, where they have family members who can't move, where they have family members who have been killed, where they have no ability to transport themselves, where there's nowhere to even go as if there's adequate resources in the south to handle that influx of 1 million people down there. I mean, we're talking about Israel demanding that hospitals evacuate in the north of Gaza, evacuate all of these hospitals, okay, and flee to the south because we're going to go bomb the hospitals. And then you have doctors coming out saying, you are asking us to guarantee that all of the patients, the thousands of people who are taking refuge here, and the patients that we are treating are going to die because of that. You can't simply evacuate a hospital. You can't simply evacuate the entirety of the northern strip. But they're using that as like the flimsiest justification possible to say, well, we gave them a warning. Aren't we so nice that we gave this population that we have been imprisoning in the Gaza Strip for almost 2 decades now straight under this complete and total siege? Aren't we so nice that we're giving them a warning to flee to a slightly different part of the prison we're keeping them before we bomb their heads in? And by the way, they've also been bombing the south of Gaza. It's not as if the south of Gaza is like, they're not firing down there. Oh, that's a completely safe area. They've also been bombing the south of Gaza. So it's complete bullshit at every level that you want to look at it. And this is what the Biden administration is giving the complete okay to, including other Democrats as well. Like here we have Hakeem Jeffries when he was asked about this bombing of the Jabalia refugee camp. Let's see what this guy has to say.
Attacking that Palestinian refugee camp in the hopes of killing a top Hamas leader?
I'm unfamiliar with the particulars on the strike, and so I'll reserve judgment, but I know that Israel is taking every effort to continue to conduct this necessary war following the international rules of warfare, and I would expect that it will continue to do that.
They have not been operating under the international laws of war for a single day during this siege, okay? Not a single fucking day. All right, is it under the guidance of the international laws of war to cut off power, to cut off the electricity, the food, the water from the entirety of the 2.2 million people living in Gaza? Is that following in accordance with international humanitarian law and the laws of war? Okay, is it under the humanitarian laws of war that you can bomb mosques and schools and UN buildings and refugee camps with complete impunity? Is it under the international laws of war that you can kill over 3,000 children so far during this bombing campaign? That's all just they've been following the laws of war. And I'm sure, even though I know nothing about the bombing of this refugee camp, that they'll continue to do that. I mean, it's just an abject lie. I mean, what kind of people are these, right? This is the supposed left-wing half of the government of the United States of America. This is the leadership within the Democratic Party in the House, all right? This is your new, House Democratic leadership, all right? And this guy is out here saying, well, I don't really know anything about it, so I can't really comment on it. I don't know. They're my friends, so I can't tell you whether or not it's good or bad that they just bombed dozens and dozens or hundreds of civilians in a refugee camp. Who would know whether or not that's bad, right? I mean, it's so ironic. It's deeply ironic, right? When Hamas goes into southern Israel and they kill civilians, the entirety of the U.S. political sphere turns around and they say Hamas is literally the reincarnation of Hitler combined with the worst members of ISIS, okay? But then when Israel spends 3 weeks bombing innocent men, women, and children in the Gaza Strip, cutting off their food, their water, okay, their electricity, destroying hospitals, mosques, schools, all the rest of that, and killing all of these people, they turn around and they're like, oopsie daisies, I don't know. Who knows if that's good or bad? I'm sure they have some sort of a justification. Please follow in accordance with the laws of war. I mean, fucking useless. These people have blood on their hands. They legitimately have blood on their hands. Because it's not just that they're giving them diplomatic cover. They're also sending them weapons. We're passing aid packages. I mean, it was just a couple months ago, I talked about on this channel, the House of Representatives passed a bill, nearly unanimously. Okay, we had a couple members of like the squad who were brave enough, I guess, to vote against this, right? But almost unanimously, Democrats and Republicans, they literally a couple months ago passed a bill that was just a bill to say Israel is not an apartheid state. Israel is not a racist state. That was the bill. Okay, do Americans get health care? No. Do Americans get free education? No. Okay, do Americans get student debt relief? No. Living wages? No. None of that. But we do have a Congress that can nearly unanimously pass a bill saying that an apartheid state is not an apartheid. That a country doing an ethnic cleansing in our name with our dollars is not racist. That's what we have for a government here in the United States. Fucking useless. And just as a comparison here, even from previous neocons, from previous war hawks, now to the Joe Biden administration. Here is pointed out by Mohammed. In 2002, George W. Bush, okay, I don't know if there's a single politician on the face of the planet who has more blood on their hands than George W. Bush, but even he strongly denounced Israel for killing Hamas's top militant leader because 7 kids were killed in the same strike. Today, Israel killed and wounded 400 Gazans in Jabalia, in this refugee camp, to allegedly kill a single Hamas platoon commander. Not a single word from the US or the EU. President Bush issued one of his sharpest rebukes against Israel today, denouncing as, quote, heavy-handed the attack that killed a Hamas leader and expressing a regret over the loss of innocent life. This heavy-handed action does not contribute to peace, said the president's chief spokesperson, Ari Fleischer. This message will convey to Israel authorities and the United States regrets the loss of life. At least 14 other people, including several children, were killed in a missile attack that killed Salah Shahadeh, a founder and the top commander of Hamas's military wing. So, in other words, Joe Biden is currently operating, in terms of his diplomatic cover for Israel, to the right of George W. Bush. That's where we're at right now, okay? Bombing refugee camps, all of these other civilian infrastructure. I mean, listen, you don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take my word for it that Israel is wantonly committing war crimes left and right with our dollars, with our weapons, with our diplomatic cover. You can just go and look at what Israeli politicians are saying, right? Guys like Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, saying there are no innocent civilians within Gaza. That's what he said. That's what he said when this military operation was commencing. And then you have even Democratic lawmakers like Hakeem Jeffries or Joe Biden or John Kirby, a representative of Biden, coming out and saying they're following in accordance with the international laws of war. Do the international laws of war say that the offensive side, the offensive side that is doing this bombing campaign can simply say there are no innocent civilians? Is that in accordance with international law? Is that what that is? Okay. I mean, so many other different statements we could give of guys like Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich and Benjamin Netanyahu, who have been talking in an explicitly genocidal way. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu went before the world and in English told Western, European countries and the United States, he gave a biblical justification. He compared the Palestinians in Gaza to Amalek, and he was explicitly referencing a biblical quote that he cited that involves killing innocent men, women, and children. It says, "Be as brutal as you want to everybody who is responsible for Amalek." That's what he just quoted. All right. So these are the kinds of people we're dealing with right now. These are the kinds of people we're supporting right now. And I don't know how you could possibly get around calling it a genocide in Gaza. Now, if you don't want to call it a genocide, call it an ethnic cleansing. Call it a series of strung together war crimes. Call it whatever you want to call it. This shit is awful. It is inhumane. It is barbaric. This is terrorism. Okay. And this is what the U.S. government is standing firmly behind right now.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying